Hi, Yisachar Wartel here. Happy Sukkot, Sukkot Sameach, Chag Sameach, whatever you want to say. It is a wonderful, amazing time of year. We have just finished Rosh Hashanah. We have then finished Yom Kippur. We have finished building our Sukkah, hopefully finished building our Sukkah, and now we're up to the amazing holiday of Sukkot, or Sukkot, as some people say. Now, there's so many things to talk about. One thing I want to talk about is the essence of the two mitzvot that we have on Sukkot, the two essential primary mitzvot we have, namely lulav, or the taking of the arba minim, the four species, as well as actually sitting or possibly sleeping in a sukkah. Those are the two primarily mitzvot that are unique as a function to this chag. Now, this is almost a function of duality in a certain sense. Now, we have many things that have a sense of duality to them. One thing or the other. Even Shabbos itself has a duality, the previous week and the upcoming week. There are many things that have two different aspects to them. Now, as we will see, these two aspects of Sukkot are actually, in one sense, one and the same, but are also inherently opposite. Let me explain. Each one of these mitzvot serves a different set of functions, right? But ultimately it comes down to being external versus internal. Now, as Chazal explained, the rabbis explain, taking the lulav, the etrog, the hadassim, the aravot, the arba minim, the four species as we call it, is an internal mitzvah, right? As the Torah states, lachem, it should be vahitim lachem, it should be for you, right? Every person, at least on the first day, maybe not this year if it's Shabbos, but that's a separate point, right? We are required to have our own arba minim. We're required to have our own lulav and etrog, and of course the other species. Right? It is a personal mitzvah, right? Yes, I mean, if we need to, we can borrow, and there's a whole way of doing that on the first day and other days, but ideally, we should have our own. It is something that's intrinsic to us. It is our personal way of connecting on this chag in our particular way. Now, as Rabbi Mashiach Kalati explains, somebody who I absolutely love listening to at any time, he points out that a sukkah does not have to really belong to anybody, unlike the arba minim, which certainly do, right? The sukkah that we sit in is a communal mitzvah. The arba minim are a personal mitzvah. And this is part of the bifocused nature of the Yomim Narayim, as well as of Sukkot, and we actually have many other times of the year, including on Pesach, that we have a duality, the concept of matzah, right? So matzah is lechem oni, it's a poor man's bread, but we are also celebrating our freedom. So at the same time we're at the Seder, we're talking about and lamenting about how we were slaves and how we were poor and everything that happened, but yet at the same time that we're free. So we're grappling with both of these things. So it's not uncommon to have two opposite, aspects, two opposite mitzvot or two opposite focuses, especially ones that complement each other. The tefillot and the Shemona Esrei are also, in a certain sense, a duality, but operating both at the same time. The Shemona Esrei is perhaps the most personal tefillah that we have in our regular regiment of davening. Yet, almost every aspect of the Shemona Esrei prayer, other than the small things we may say separately, is communal. It's in the plural, right? It's a personal tefillah. We're talking to Hashem, but we're talking about plural. So there is both going on at the same time. We have our inherent connection and our inherent prayers and our communication on an individual level talking to Hashem, but we're also talking to Hashem on a greater level on the behalf of the community because we're all one. And we see this by more than almost anything else by the lulav and etrog, which I'll explain momentarily. Additionally, Chazal teach that if we do something good, it not only benefits us, but it benefits the world. And if we do something wrong, conversely, then it can damage not only ourselves or our standing in Hashem's eyes, but it can also damage the world, right? On Sukkot, we have the ability to perform two very different but complementary mitzvot. It's very interesting. We take our hands and we envelop these arba minim, these four species, right? We have the etrog kind of holding like in one, and we have the three and the other ones together, the lulav, the hadassim, and the aravos. We kind of hold them together. I was going to speak about as the concept of aguda achas, right? One binding. All right, we'll talk about that in a moment. But as Chazal teach, these four species represent four types of Jews, right? Represents ones who have, abundant mitzvot and good deeds. We have ones that just have mitzvot. We have ones that just have good deeds, and we have ones that have neither. And all are essential. They're all part of one community. And this is something that I've spoken about before, and many, almost everybody who's ever given a Dvar Torah about Sukkot has probably spoken about that. So feel free to look up more information about that. But simply it's this. Some have taste, some have smell, some have neither, some have both, representing different types of Jews. There's many other types of symbolism, different parts of the body, etc. But ultimately, these four are indispensable. You can't do the mitzvah with two or three of them. You have to do all four, which means every Jew counts, every type of person counts, and different parts of the body counts, and every other symbolism that's combined, but it's together. And we're holding it in our hands. We have that control, in a sense, but it's on a personal level, right? Hashem is telling us that we can impact the world being symbolized, or at least the Jewish people, being symbolized by these Arba Minim in many respects. And we're holding them in our hand, and we're shaking them in every direction of the earth, in 6 directions, back and forth and right and left and up and down, or whatever order you do it in, right? It's connected to Tenufa, the waving offerings that we did in the Beit HaMikdash, right? We are covering all directions, and we're using our hands, which have amazing mystical significance, something I've spoken about before, and obviously is very common throughout Chazal as well as Kabbalah, right? Hands, the word yad, I'm just very briefly touching upon the surface, is composed of a yud and a daled, which have almost opposite meanings. The daled representing the super physicality, yud representing spirituality, coming together to form the letter hey, which has the daled with the yud in it, which is effectively part of the way this world was constructed, was through the letter hey, and the way we interact with this world is through the letter hey, which is a topic for another discussion, but it's interesting. But ultimately, it comes down to one. Everything should be unified together, right? We may have a set of 4. We may have a set of 4 walls, which I'm going to get to also later when we talk about the Sukkah. But everything ultimately comes together as one, and that's really the point. The Gemara in Masechet Sukkah, as Rabbi Yehuda explains, it is so essential that these Arba Minim be together as one, that it actually requires an eged. It requires a binding or a tie around them, or it's not valid. Your hands alone are not enough. It needs something more inherently symbolic. We're so used to our hands, as amazing as they are, and as amazing significance, and all the things they can do. But Rabbi Yehuda says that we need an additional reminder of connecting all of these 4 things at once. These 4 types of Jews, these 4 aspects of life, the 4 different parts of the body, whatever they 4 represent. 4 completely different aspects. You can even say north, east, west, south if you wanted to, right? We're combining different aspects as one. There's a sense of unity, right? And this, in a sense, parallels Shavuos, even though usually Sukkot parallels Pesach more. That's somewhat of a different thing. But even on Pesach, we have a sense of unity. We bring people together as the Seder. At the Seder, Hashem took us out from Mitzrayim as one klal, as one nation. And then ultimately, as part of that process, we got the Har Sinai Ki Ish Echad B'Lev Echad, like one heart with one nation. Right? One nation with one heart. The goal is to be one, but it doesn't necessarily mean to be the same. You could be an Arava, you could be a Hadas, you could be an Etrog, you could be a Lulav, you could be some crossbreed between. But ultimately, we want to be one together. Now, we hold that the actual physical binding, whatever, let's say a plant ring, whatever, is not necessary. An eged is not necessary. Because our hands, Chazal hold, are, in fact, important enough. And our hands, in fact, make that eged. Right? So unlike Rabbi Yehuda, who says we need a physical eged, Chazal say there's nothing more physical than our hands. Yet, despite the fact that they also have an amazing spiritual prowess. The tie that holds the bundles together is our hands. And we see this by the term aguda achas, right, or aguda achat, right, one tie, which is actually something which we say multiple times. We say it repeatedly on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So if you're paying attention to the davening, you would have seen this. If not, pay attention next year, right? This has to do with the collective unity and mission of the Jewish people. And ultimately, when we reach some level of unity, we'll be able to finally bring Mashiach. But ultimately, the goal is to be as unified as we possibly can. Now, during the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur davening, we say, "V'yasu kulam aguda achat lasot ritzoncha b'levav shalem," and may all the Jewish people be an aguda achat to do your will with a complete heart. Now, this term is also used in Shmuel Bet when the tribe of Binyamin comes together in unity to stop Yoav from inciting more war. Again, they want to have more unity and they want to have more peace. They don't want to have more division. Bear with me, there's more to it than that. This term, aguda achas, connotes a oneness and unity, but it's not everybody being the same. It's not uniformity. That's a big difference. There's a big difference between unity and uniformity. Not everybody has to be the same, nor should they be the same. But it's important for people to have common goals and some aspects of commonality that they can bond together with and become that aguda achas. In fact, this term of aguda, right, aleph, gimel, daled, hey, which means grouping or binding, is numerically to the number 13, which is the same gematria as echad, meaning one. So aguda and echad are both one. They're both 13. And together, that equals 26, which is Hashem's most amazing name, the gematria of Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? The tetragrammaton, the amazing and ineffable name of Hashem, is equal to 26, right? Hashem wants us to have this oneness, and He wants us to share this oneness with Him. He wants us to come together and share this mitzvah with Him on a deep personal level. Of course, we also want to share it on a communal level, and that's where the sukkah fits in. I'll get to that in a second. So as I mentioned, the term aguda, aleph, gimel, daled, hey, is an important word, which means tying together. But if you notice, it's also the first 5 letters of the alphabet. Or is it? Aleph, bet, gimel, daled, hey. Aleph, gimel, daled, hey. Aguda. Something's missing. What is it? The bet, right? Or beis, as some people say. The letter bet is missing. Why is the letter bet missing? Well, some may say that bet is like building a house, and we have to kind of build things, but Chazal also teach that the letter bet connotes machlokas, right? Bet is a sense of duality in a bad way, when two people are striving against each other in a negative way, in which they're grinding against each other in a negative fashion. It's machlokas, it's strife, right? This number 2, which is what the letter bet represents, can sometimes be irreconcilable differences, which is not something we want, and is the opposite of unity. So when we have an aguda, and we want to focus on this unity, we temporarily remove the letter bet. Later, when we learn to reconcile our differences, can we bring that bet back and turn it into a bayit, which is what it also represents, and we can build it up and come together. It's also interesting that we take it, when we Chazal teach, we use the eged, the binding, with our hands. And in fact, the words yadayim al ha'arba, which literally means hands on the 4, referring to the 4 species, is in fact numerically equal in gematria to ke aguda achas, like an aguda achas, like one binding or one connection, which is pretty cool. Hashem wants ultimately Jews to do one purpose, and that's to satisfy and to perform His will. Right? How we do it, there's some interpretation. Everybody has their own ways. Obviously, we want to follow in the way of the mitzvos and the way of halacha, but there's definitely more than one approach. Right? We see this by the Hasidim, we see it by the Litvaks, we see it by Sephardim. Right? There's many different ways to do it, many of which are very valid approaches. Right? But ultimately, Hashem wants us to come together in one complete heart, with our differences, but come together in unity. Now that's the function of the lulav, right? Each person individually, despite his differences, can still work together with other people, and we can focus on our connection personally to Hashem, irrespective of how we may be different from other people. But the sukkah is us as a collective, right? Unlike the arba minim, which we enclose with our hands, the sukkah we are enclosed by. Right? The walls surround us, right? The Shekhinah, the clouds of glory, whatever you want to call it, the forces around us. It encloses around us. It, in a sense, gives us a hug. Unlike the Arba Minim, in which we're giving a hug in a sense, the sukkah walls are giving us a hug, right? It's Hashem giving us a hug. It's a day of closeness. It's a day of simcha. And Hashem wants to teach us that there's 2 ways of thinking things, right? What I do matters to others, and what others matters to me, and ultimately we're all part of one. We're part of one on the small scale, and we're part of one on the big scale, right? The sukkah also has 6 directions. We think about it as the 4 walls, or potentially 4 walls, right? But it really has 6, because it has the schach above, and it has the 4 below. And the schach perhaps being the most important, and we look up to Shemayim. Obviously Hashem's everywhere, but that's how we prompt to think about it, by looking up to Shemayim. Maybe we'll see the stars, whatever it might be. Now, the schach, which is one of those 6 directions, reminds us not just to look up to the heavens or whatever we want to think, but it's something that is curious. When we look up, there's actually, I believe scientists explain that there's something that goes on with our brain that we tend to contemplate deeper when we look up, as opposed to like when we look down. There's a level of like depression and closedness. When we look up, there's a sense of openness. We see the sky above us. Right? So we see the schach above us, and we want to understand what it represents. Why is it there? Why did Hashem give it to us? And that's a whole topic of another drasha. But Hashem wants us to look up. Why? Because look up is potential. Same way a tree grows up, things grow upwards, they develop, right? Babies start on the ground, they start on the floor, they start crawling, they start walking, ultimately they start running, then they can jump. We want to move upwards. The goal is to move upwards. Hashem wants growth. And the best way to grow is by helping each other as a sense of community. And another way that we can grow is by getting rid of what is weighing us down. We have just had Yom Kippur, which is an amazing day that we can clean our slate, and Hashem helped us in getting rid of our averos, hopefully. And we're a little bit freer, we're perhaps a little bit lighter. We can jump, we can lift up, we can rise a little bit more towards the occasion, we can float a little bit closer to that tzchach, and we can do it in everyone's proximity. But perhaps we can even build on each other's merits. In fact, that's what the minyan is about. That communally our merits add up so that we're more focused, or rather Hashem is more focused on our merits when we're a collective. Right? When we are in some unity, especially when we're physically together, not just unity in thought, but we're physically together doing one thing. So in this, whether it's davening or whether it's sitting in a sukkah having a meal, there's something amazing to that. There's an additional duality that we see between the concept of sukkah and lulav and etrog, or the arba minim. Right? The lulav and etrog and arba minim, as we said, are somewhat more of a personal level and somewhat more of a personal relationship towards this common goal, or aguda achas, or this unity. Right? But a lot of that is centered, perhaps, on mitzvot ben adam u'makom, right? The way we interact with Hashem, the way that we interact on a personal or individualistic level. That makes us potentially different, and we have to overcome those differences and come together. But sukkah is keneged the mitzvah ben adam u'chavero, which is why sukkah is actually of the pillars, Torah, avodah, and gemilut chasadim, right? Torah, worship, which can either be sacrifices or davening, and Gemilut Chasadim, acts of chesed, acts of giving and kindness. Sukkah is connected to that. There's an aspect of giving. It's also connected to the concept of water, which is a whole other thing. There's so many things that are interconnected. It's crazy. And the more you think about it, the more you discover, the more you're likely to go crazy. But it's amazing. Your heart will just float the more you delve into it. It's remarkably incredible. And that's one of the many, many proofs I have of God. But that's a separate conversation. Right? The sukkah is bringing people together from different backgrounds and enclosing them in the proverbial clouds of glory, right? That's what the walls always can, but often represent. And it's when we have it together and we have those walls around us and we have this complete picture and we're coming together all for one purpose, for the purpose of the Chag, and to celebrate our joy in front of Hashem. That's a sense of completeness. And we say, Sukkot Shilomecha. In fact, there's actually a big connection between Sukkot and Shabbos. And we have Sukkot falling out on Shabbos this year. The beginning of Sukkot is on Shabbos. Even Shmini Atzeret is on Shabbos this year. And there's a big connection between that and Shalom, which again is a topic for another time. There's so much you could talk about. It's crazy. You could spend the entire year just talking about Sukkot. Really talk about Pesach all year long too. But this concept of Shalom, this concept of peace, when people are in unity and are together with a common goal, again, despite their differences, when they come together, especially if they come together physically, such as in a sukkah or in a shul, right? There's a sense, there's an opportunity to be shalem, there's an opportunity to be complete. Now, many know that the sukkah word, right, samech, chaf, hey, is a mnemonic for the three different types of walls you can have. You can have the samech, which is fully enclosed, representing 4 walls. You have the chaf, which is open on one side, symbolizing 3 walls. And you have the hey, which is 2 and a fraction, which is the minimum amount for a sukkah to be kosher. We often think that a sukkah has to have 4 walls. It's not true, but it is the ideal if it can have 4 walls. Sukkah is a time of a collective. You need more than half. You need more than half of the walls, so 2 plus. Now, interestingly enough, another mitzvah that we have on Sukkot, which we unfortunately don't have anymore, is the mitzvah of Hakel, right? The mitzvah of gathering everybody together in Klal Yisrael, at least that's able to make it to the Har Bayis, to be able to make it to the Temple Mount back in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, and reading the Torah in front of everybody. The king and the Kohen Gadol would be there, the greatest sages of the generation, everybody would be there, right? The laymen, the water dwellers, everybody would be there. The kids, everybody would be there. Anybody that could potentially make it. It was an amazing, amazing spectacle, and they would all come to hear the Torah as one. right? Hakel means to gather. There's a sense of gathering, right? We see that by the Arba Minim, which we're gathering, and then the walls which gather us. And that's the sense of communal gathering. And that's perhaps an even greater gathering. We don't need to build a sukkah. There's no mitzvah to build a sukkah. Now, if that's the only way you're going to have a sukkah, then yes, you're obligated to build a mitzvah, to build a sukkah. But the goal is to be in the sukkah. To be in the sukkah and to connect with Hashem, and ideally you want to be with other people. You want to connect through this sense of community, through something embracing you, to give in to Hashem's embrace and to be connected with other people. We want to gather together. We want to invite people, just like we do as a Seder, to the meal, right? But that's not the only thing that we have which has the word hakel, which means to group together, right? It's the word related to the word for kihila, which means a congregation, and we certainly get together in our congregations as well. And we also read the book of Kohelet, right? We read the book of, I believe it's Ecclesiastes. I hope that's correct. And it's a very, very fascinating, although largely depressing book. But if you understand it, it's actually truly amazing, right? The word Kohelet actually means gathering or collective. And one other thing, which is perhaps the pinnacle of the Simcha, right? Not perhaps, like the Chazal in the Gemara say that it is absolutely the pinnacle, which unfortunately we no longer have. It's a Simcha Beit HaShoeva. Yeah, we have little, nights, whatever, where we have, dancing and maybe a bonfire or something like that. But the Gemara says that the biggest joy, the biggest spectacle one could ever see in their entire lifetime was the Simcha Beit HaShoeva, the special water drawing ceremony, and had the most amazing acts and feats there in the times of Beit HaMikdash. So we don't have that. We have a little reminder of it. But it talks about the time of Simcha, right? And why do we have so much Simcha? Again, that's also a topic for another time. But part of it is the Simcha of knowing that we're coming together. We're coming together for a purpose. We're unified for a common goal. We're unified for a common mitzvah. We're unified and sitting around and enjoying each other's company instead of bickering, instead of fighting. We're focusing on the Aleph Gimel Daled instead of the Bet. We're focusing on what we need to do, not on what we don't do. We're focusing on what's right, not what's wrong. Now, what's interesting is that a Seder, everybody comes in, right? You can invite anybody to a Seder, right? Anybody you meet at Shul, anybody, who needs a place for the Seder, you can welcome them in. And the same thing is true with the Sukkah. But there's something a little bit different, right? In a Seder, they're coming into your house. In a Sukkah, in a sense, they're also coming into your house, but it's a very different kind of house. Now, a Sukkah is something which is both temporary and permanent at the same time. It's supposed to be like your house, but in a sense, it's less personal. Right? Your house is your personal domain, right? You, your wife, your husband, whatever, right? You own it, or you're renting it, or it's your apartment, whatever it is, it's your place. You're inviting other people. You're doing an amazing act of chesed, but ultimately it's your place. You're bringing people in. The sukkah doesn't really belong to anybody. Yeah, maybe you paid for the walls, maybe you built it, but the sukkah is an object of mitzvah. It's something which we all are part of anyway. So you can invite somebody to it, but you're not really truly inviting somebody to your sukkah. Yeah, as I said, maybe it's on your land, maybe you put up the schach, but it's everybody's sukkah. It's a mitzvah for everybody, and every Jew has the ability to go into that sukkah. They can literally walk into that sukkah, and you wouldn't have to invite them. Whereas if you have somebody walk into your house, that's not usually so nice, and you'd rather they be invited. A sukkah, anybody can go in, right? Again, putting aside the aspects of trespassing, but because of the land aspect. But from a pure spiritual perspective, the sukkah belongs to everybody, right? And the reason a sukkah can have two walls, right? We want it to be fully enclosed, but it can have openings. And we a lot of times want those openings. We want there to be little openings because we want doors. Avram Avinu had doors on all four sides of his tent, or openings on four sides of his tent. Our sukkah may not be practical to have walls that have four breaches in them because it might not stand. So we may have a full enclosure with a very small gap. We may have a whole wall that's missing. We may have two walls that are almost entirely missing, and people can just come in droves. Whatever it is, we want the sukkah to be inviting. We want to know that the door is always open, and that anybody who is in need can come by. That's also the idea, kind of like sukkah hopping for the kids, and it's really cute. They can just come in. They can stop at any point. People give them candy. It's a really nice thing. We want to encourage this idea not only of giving, but of welcomingness, or welcomeness, whatever the word is, right? We want to be welcoming. Even if it's not truly our home, we might feel like it's our sukkah, and that gives us a special pleasure to be able to help people. Like we may have built it to enable it, but ultimately it's a mitzvah for everybody. And the last lesson I want to leave you with is that the goal of Sukkot is not just about unity. It's not just about coming together. It's not about focusing both inward and outward, internally and externally, but also to internalize what is outside and to bring what's inside outside, right? We take what's outside, which is our hands in a certain sense, and we bring them in. We take what's inside, which is us inside our house, and we go outside. We go out into our backyard or someone's lawn or someone else's house, and we go into their sukkah. We go outside, literally outside. We are switching from one to the other, and perhaps we're even going out of our comfort zone, or we're bringing other people in. And that's important as well, right? We want to reach out to others, but we also want to draw people in. And we want to be brought in by others, and that sometimes means we need to go out, right? So that's a really important place. And Hashem is teaching us, when is a better time? When you are now hopefully clean of your averos, after Yom Kippur, and you're on this potentially spiritual high, and you're having the simcha, share it with other people. Do whatever you can to share it with other people, and make them feel as welcome as you feel. Or perhaps you don't feel welcome, and you are giving the opportunity to somebody else for them to be welcoming. Accept that. Let them be welcoming. Let them help you. It's an amazing thing. So again, this idea of sukkah is a sense of unity, it's a sense of completion, it's a sense of peace, and it's a sense of happiness. And the happiness comes with contentment. And when is that? When we're all together and we're not fighting about different things. We're focusing on some beautiful mitzvah. If you haven't heard, I recently put out a sefer. I believe it came out this past January. It's called Parsha Ponderings. It's my first sefer on the Parsha with the Divrei Torah that I've been putting out for 13 years already. And this is just the first volume. I hope to put out, Bezrat Hashem, another one next year. I do need sponsors in order to make that happen. But first, I want you to take a look at this book. Let me know what you think. Let me know, listen to my Divrei Torah. And please give me words of encouragement and spread it along to others. It is an amazing honor and blessing to be able to have a book that has been published. But it's more of an honor if it means something to you. Right? If I can find a way to touch your hearts and find purpose to help you spread the love of Torah to other people, that really makes it all worthwhile. So again, I hope to have more, but ultimately I want to wish you with this. May we have a complete new year with only blessing, and may the complete redemption come speedily in our days. And that can come with unity, that can come with oneness, that can come with amazing chesed and love for one another. And may we be able to bask in the true clouds of glory, in Hashem's glory, in the real sukkah of the Beit HaMikdash and the Shekhinah that surrounds us. Wishing you all a Chag Kasher V'Sameach.